So this video is about principle of speaking our mind. I'm saying this in the context of obviously cyberspace and using YouTube. Um, I'm going to speak a little bit about how that differentiates or doesn't differentiate from the real world. Um, I've made a lot of videos, that's pretty obvious, well over 1,000 now, on a very wide range of subjects. Most of them are serious subjects with a few light-hearted videos, but the reason I do that is because I value the opportunity that YouTube presents to to offer people a platform to voice their views. So that's essentially it. I use this as a platform to share my views with whoever is willing to watch. Some of my videos only have 1 or 2 views. Some of them have thousands of views. Well, a few of them have thousands of views. But regardless of how many people watch, it's an opportunity that I value. It's a bit like if you send a comment to a national newspaper and they publish it, which I have been fortunate enough that has been the case for me several times. We have to value this because there's parts of the world where you're not given a voice. So for me, this is something that is very, very important. Um, Nevertheless, I have to admit there are times that it drains me a little bit. That is to say, when I get myself involved in discourse, and then it's a case of sort of seeing the replies. Um, Sometimes this is because I've responded to someone or they've responded to me, but it does get a bit tiresome having to constantly go back and forth. And I admit there are times when I feel I could have said more, and there's times I question, did I come on too strong? Was I too passive? I admit I do review the way I exchange discourse online. But one thing I can honestly say is that I always try to just speak what is on my mind at the time. I always try to speak with conviction. So, for example, if someone has said something that has pissed me off, I I respond the way I would. Well, I respond based on how I'm feeling at the time. And admittedly, there has been times when I have, let's say, allowed myself to use language that is just as colorful as the person I'm in discourse with. So I am not always, ultra polite, and I don't think I should be. I don't think anyone should be. Um, Sometimes rigorous debate is is important, but I do tire of like every time I open up YouTube, I've got the little bell in the corner and it's red. And to be fair, a lot of the time this is people agreeing with me or giving me thumbs up, but at least half the time it is also people taking issue with something I've said. Now, I don't begrudge this for a second. I'm not complaining about it. Insofar as when I make comments, I accept the fact that not everyone's going to agree with me, and I'm not on the conscience or on what's that word? When you know everything, I don't know everything, so I have to accept that when I make opinions, I'm putting my views out there. I have to accept responsibility that not everyone will agree with that, and people will challenge me, just as I challenge others. I accept that. Nevertheless, I can't deny that there's times it gets a bit tiring because I kind of feel compelled to reply to them, and yet I'm sort of driven between two feelings. Part of me wants to reply because I'm thinking, well, that view shouldn't be unchallenged, and I should defend myself from their allegation or their insult or whatever it is. But another part of me thinks, well, I've said what I need to say. What's the point of this constant going back and forth? So yeah, it sort of gets tiring in that sense, in that even when I've said what I want to say, I'm still not quite satisfied. Maybe that makes me stubborn, but that's how I feel. Um, So what I'm going to do from now on is try to say everything I want to say at once, rather than just little snippets. If that means longer comments, then so be it. Um, but I just get tired of this. This is the case, for example, with that video on the Chinese ambassador. I think I mentioned that a while back. I take an issue with certain Chinese nationals who were attacking the British journalist for, in my opinion, doing his job. I thought their attitude was incredibly arrogant and hypocritical. And I had a lot of back and forth on there. One guy actually accused me of being a racist, which really bugged me because it's the sort of thing that if you accuse someone of, it's very, very hard to, shake off that sort of slandering. So I guess that's why that particular video bugged me quite a lot because I felt that no matter how many times I'd made my case, they kept coming back and coming out with crap, and I just had to, But like I say, if I'm going to put my views out there, I have to accept that, if you're going to kind of get into a verbal joust, you have to expect people to retaliate. It's just the nature of, it's just human nature, and I certainly wouldn't go into any situation and expect no response. But that, I still tire of it sometimes. I know there's other people out there who take a different approach. They just don't get into any confrontation. And I have a lot of respect for that. I totally understand it. And I've got friends, for example, that would never, they would deliberately avoid any sort of discourse. Don't get me wrong, it's not that I enjoy confrontation. I really, really don't. It's just that I genuinely feel compelled sometimes to speak up for my conviction. And if I see an opinion which to me is just utterly wrong, I do feel compelled to challenge it. And it's not that I'm childish and I go in and just insult people. I go in and try to offer an alternative point of view. And they do the same thing with me sometimes. I don't want this to all sound negative because there has been times when I've got into a mature debate with people and the discourse has been very civil. We've had different points of view, but the discourse has been very civil. I wish that I could say that was the case in most of this, but truthfully, a lot of the time it's ended up in a kind of verbal, not necessarily mudslinging contest, but it has been less sort of polite than it could have been. And it is a pity because in the real world, I honestly believe, I'll take that video with the Chinese guys as an example. I honestly believe had I met any of those guys in a pub and we'd sat down with a drink, it would be a lot more civil than what it was online. Um, it's not necessarily that one situation is more honest than the other. I think you can be honest whilst taking different measures of how you go about it. So, for example, I had a discussion with a guy I met the other night in the pub, Chinese guy, and again we actually found a lot of common ground on issues. But he basically conceded a lot of the things that I believe, like the Communist Party's being brutally dishonest and so on. I don't want to make this whole video about the Chinese issues, but it's just an example. Now, I'm thinking the guys that are coming on that video and attacking this journalist, I wonder if in real life they're probably decent people. They're probably, if I met them man to man and sort of sat down with a drink and they could see what sort of person I am, they can see that I'm open-minded. And I could see maybe that they're more open-minded than I take them for, then it would be different. But I do think cyberspace creates a barrier or a sort of shield that means that people can be a bit more vocal than they would be in real life. And I admit that I've probably done this myself. I've probably been a lot more vocal online than I would in real life. That's not to say that I'm bullshitting, and in real life I would kind of put on a false front because I wouldn't. But I do believe that cyberspace puts on a sort of shield that people feel is kind of, because you can turn off a computer whenever you want. If you're sitting down with someone, okay, maybe you can make an excuse and leave, but it's not quite so simple. Um, Also, when there's verbal mudslinging online, it's safe. It may be unpleasant, but it's safe. In the real world, there's a chance of violence breaking out. So that's a big difference. Yeah, that's it really. I'm just sharing some of these thoughts because it's something that has kind of been on my mind a lot in the last few weeks. I'll continue to make up videos and I'll continue to speak out about things that I feel strongly about. I've got no questions about my views whatsoever because I always think carefully about how I reach my opinions. But I admit that confrontation does get tiring sometimes. So I'm just wondering if anyone else feels that way. I'm not asking for people's opinions, I'm just asking if anybody else sometimes gets tired of this back and forth online. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying, I think cyberspace can be a good medium for debate, but sometimes that debate perhaps gets more childish than it can be. And everyone just wants to make their own point and wants to stand their ground. And speaking plainly, I think there is ego involved. I'll be brutally honest. My ego's played into it. Because I don't like to think that people are walking over me verbally and they're calling me things that is not true, and probably I'm calling them names as well, which might not be entirely fair. But there is definitely ego involved, and that's a pity. But what I would say is this: what I've learned from all of this is do speak with conviction, because this is a great opportunity to do so. But there's nothing wrong with trying to find common ground as well. That's not weakness. That's practical. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you.